when my family sometimes asks me about, like, why does this happen? Why did this driver do this or get this? Or why did they do this deal or whatever? I'm always like, you're coming from a rational mindset. Racing is an irrational business. It's an irrational endeavor. There is no rationality to any of this as to why we go and spend and light on fire hundreds of millions of dollars per year to try and go in circles faster than the other one. So welcome to racing.
Yeah, and there's a very big double-edged sword, I find, as a spectator when it comes to choosing your team or getting hired by a team for the coming years. If you get hired by a small team, an underfunded team, that could impact your career and maybe be the end of your career if you can't perform there. But also, if you get hired by a really big team and you don't meet their expectations, that can also hurt your career. How do you navigate that?
I think it's probably the same for actors or musicians, anyone who wants to entertain or to do something that has high status. It is going to come with a need to have just almost a blind optimism, right? A idea that, like, if I go into this thing, it's all going to work out. And yeah, there's all these drawbacks, but don't worry about that. I'm not going to think of it, right? And you have to have that. So you just got to make the best decision you can when you're looking at those team options as you're coming up through your career, and try to, have this mindset of, like, it's going to work out because that's the only thing that works.
Throughout your career, something I find really interesting is the fact that you've been at these big teams, you've been at these small teams, and you've also been at these middle ground teams. You've been from Penske to Swan Racing to everywhere. How do things change when you go from team to team? How does your driving style change? Your budgets, what you're told to do, your expectations, and also what do you learn that you can take to the next team no matter what size they are?
The smaller teams often was out of necessity to keep going. But I think at those teams like Henderson Motorsports and the Truck Series, you really learn to just focus on the basics. And when you're at the big teams, what you're fighting for and what you're trying to find is tiny fractions of a second to outdo the other top teams to be the leader of a race for the majority of it, right? And to have a dominant race car and to find things 3 months in advance of where you're actually going to be going. When you're at a small team, you're literally trying to get to the track, and then you're just trying to literally be as competitive as possible on that specific day. And so it means you can't do anything out of ordinary. You can't do anything crazy. You got to just be smart and get to the basics. And so it's an entirely different mentality of how you race. And I think NASCAR is unique in global motorsports in that you have, even in the lower series, so trucks and Xfinity, you have teams who operate on a business model that is not about winning, right? It doesn't really occur in Formula 2 or F3 or F4. The teams that aren't going to be there very long. There's no business model there. It's really, they're there to try and give drivers a chance to win, and then they go on to the next thing. Whereas NASCAR, these teams exist and operate and become businesses that are, about running 20th in Xfinity or about running 10th in trucks, that sort of thing, and even especially in the Cup Series. So there's a business reason for them to exist, and so you have to kind of approach it as a professional and less as like, hey, I'm in the Xfinity Series, this isn't the top, it's just for fun. No, this is a real business, this is people's livelihoods. And so there's a seriousness that comes with that, but you got to be smarter than you might be at a bigger team because what you're racing for is different, if that makes sense.
It's amazing. I was going to say, but sometimes winning isn't always winning.
Get out of my brain! What's wrong with you? Get out of my brain! Jeez. Can I have some thoughts to myself for a second here? Honest.
Sometimes winning is a top 20, and you were just like, sometimes winning is 10th place.
Anyone listening to this is like, I think these two have met before. What is wrong with them?
You're going through all of these different teams and things in your career, and you're experiencing all these different things. How do you feel like it changed you as a person and also an athlete from that young Parker to who you are right now?
A lot. Incredible amount. I can't believe when I look back at 18-year-old me that one held a job, one had any ability to be in the position he was. And like I was just young. I was young and stupid and figuring out life and trying to, I guess, live and learn. And then, things get serious at times and you do a lot of growing up in those moments. You make mistakes. You do a lot of growing up in those moments. And then, you make bad decisions. You do a lot of growing up in those moments. And then sometimes it goes really well. And you grow up in those as well because, sometimes it's the result of what you learned when it went wrong. So I think that's natural for life. I don't think racing or athleticism is any different. I think the one thing that racing has that's unique compared to other sports is when I mention stuff out of your control, there's also this massive financial component to it that means that even if you do everything right and you have operated at the highest level possible and you have exceeded every expectation and you have done, you have gotten the results, it still might not work out. And that's just the nature of this game. Once again, back to the irrationality of it all.
The epitome of here today, gone tomorrow, no matter how successful you are, is Martin Truex Jr. winning that incredible Cup Series championship for Furniture Row. And then the next year, Furniture Row no longer exists. It's just, you can win the top championship and then your team can disappear. It's just gone in a flash. But I do think having these other endeavors, having something else you can do if your driving career takes a pause or ends is really important. And you've been doing that. Has it been a conscious effort to become a media personality and a TV person and a podcaster, or were these things you just branched into by chance?
I get asked all the time by young aspiring journalists and want to be on TV or whatever, and they're like, how do you do this? Like, where do I start, whatever? And I was like, well, try to be a race car driver, fail at that, and then you might get a shot in this. And so, I like to say I failed into all of it, but that's not entirely true. I think when social media was kind of becoming a thing in the early 2010s, that area, I started to try to take it slightly seriously. I did a little bit of YouTube early on. I was writing for Jalopnik and while racing full time. And then when Swan Racing folded in 2014, and I had opportunities to keep driving full time, but they just weren't great opportunities. I felt like at that time, that stuff that I had done, not purposely thinking of this, but just sort of trying to be, knowing that as a race car driver, if a company is going to give you millions and millions of dollars, they are not going to just want the race car, be a billboard on the race car. You got to be more, right? And so because of that, I got a call from NBC Sports when I was in between those rides and just basically said, hey, would you like to come do some TV? And I was like, where are you guys at? And they said, Stamford, Connecticut. And I was like, that's where I'm from. I'll come home. And I remember thinking, I'll go do this for 3 months, maybe max, and I'll be back in a full-time ride. This is go easy. I'll go grow my profile. I'll be, well known, and I'll be back in the, Hendrick Motorsports tomorrow. I turned around 9 years later, and I was still doing it and was doing it full time. So I don't know if any of it was purposeful. The job opportunities for having one semester of college and being a field race car driver are not abundant. So, if they're willing to pay you to go talk about race cars and be at the racetrack, awesome. Second part of that was out of sight, out of mind. So to me, it was like, if I'm there and I'm talking to people and people see me and they know I'm still involved in the sport, maybe that'll lead to the right opportunity. And eventually it led to multiple opportunities. And then finally with Big Machine Racing. So I hate to say all of it was by design because I'm just not that smart, but I'm very, very grateful and lucky that it's all happened this way. It all worked out, but not by any chance was it by design.
Something I find really fascinating about any person or any area of life is that when you're a kid and you're good at something, you are this young phenom. You're going to take the world by storm. You're going to light everything on fire. You're going to be the best thing anybody's ever seen. And as people get older, everyone stops looking at you like that. You just become another adult. Is this something you think about as someone who has come up through the ranks and you're just doing a job like other adults now? You're driving a race car as a job, but you're not that kid anymore. Is that weird for you? It's weird for me sometimes.
I do think about that. And it is, having been that young kid who had all the enthusiasm around him and was a young phenom, whatever, and then became who I am now, which is more of I get to do this, right? Which is cool. That is a different mentality, and it is an adjustment, and I think it's natural though in life. And I don't see the young kids coming up who have a lot of enthusiasm around them, maybe Connor Zillich, whatever, and I'm not jealous. I've been there. I know exactly what they're going through, and I know it lies on both sides. I know it lies on the successful side, and I know it lies on if they're not successful. And I'm actually kind of grateful that I've seen that, because I feel like it gives you a great perspective on life and just, how this all works, and can make you more realistic about it all. But, it's so funny, as I was actually just writing this thing, and I said, when you're thinking about doing this as a career, and it's your sole objective to try and win races and that sort of stuff, all you think about are the great passes, the wins, the championships you're going to have. And the part that comes afterwards is like so far away in many ways, it could never happen to you. Like, there's no way this ever ends, that sort of thing, right? And it's funny, like you get older and you start to see like more of this from other angles, and you start to understand the world better ever. And it's amazing what goes on in that you start to see sort of where this all goes and how it could potentially end. But what's funny is you probably were so afraid of ever thinking about that as a young kid, but you're not any less, you don't perform any like worse. Like, I think in a lot of respects, sometimes I perform better than I ever have, because I'm not afraid of, the other side. I've been there. I've already seen it. I know you don't die. Like, it's not like, hey, you're not longer a race or whatever, boom, dead. It's like not how it works. There's life out there. So it really opens you up to, I feel like, have less anxiety about it, less agita, and to just enjoy it. And so growing up, it's, you're not that young phenom anymore, but there's a lot of great, awesome things in growing up.